Last week, the city controller's office released a report indicating that the homeless outreach program designed to get hundreds of homeless off the streets and into services is failing. But those behind the effort say that report was flawed and that progress is being made. Heidi Marston is the chief program officer for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Thank you for coming. Describe or define what LAHSA or your agency is and what does it do?
LAHSA is a joint powers authority between the city and the county of Los Angeles. We are the entity responsible for overseeing how we address homelessness in Los Angeles as a collective system.
And you get taxpayer money for that?
We get taxpayer money, we get federal funding, state funding, funding from a variety of sources that we give to providers to provide services.
Let me get you the reaction. Outreach workers were supposed to place into permanent housing 10% of the homeless people they assessed. But in the fiscal year that ended in June, they placed only 4%. The audit reported the goal was 20% for placing people in shelters, but they achieved only 14%. That from the LA Times. You disagree?
I do. The role of outreach is to connect individuals who are experiencing homelessness on the street to our system. Sometimes that means giving them help in helping them find housing. Other times that might mean getting them ready for housing. It could be anything from providing a hygiene kit so that they can brush their teeth or wash their hands, to bringing them to the DMV so they can get paperwork done so that they can actually apply for housing. What we see is that the path from the streets to a home is not linear, and it looks different for every person. And while getting folks housed permanently is always our goal and our North Star, it's a different experience for every person.
So you're saying progress is being made, but we may not be seeing it on the street.
That's right. We housed more than 21,000 people as our system last year. What that path looked like for all of those 21,000 is very different, and that's more than we've ever housed.
So for the people that you are housing, how many are being replaced by more homeless?
Our inflow, we call it inflow, folks who fall into the system, is quite staggering as we start to see the economic factors driving more people into homelessness. What we know is that many people in Los Angeles County, over 700,000 households, are on the verge of falling into homelessness at any given moment. So what we're trying to build is a system that prevents people from falling in the first place, and then if folks do fall in, gets them out as quickly as possible.
So one would argue, though, that they are the low-hanging fruit. Individuals who have an economic reason for being homeless, you need to find them. But the drug addicted and the mentally ill, that's a different element. And we've seen some suggestions that they're up to a third to a half of those on the street.
What we know from our last homeless count, our point-in-time count, is that about 25% of individuals who are experiencing homelessness suffer from some sort of substance abuse or mental health illness. Those folks tend to need a little bit more help, a little bit more case management and intervention, and that's what our system's built for. But what we're starting to create now is a system that prevents people from falling in the first place. The homeless system that LAHSA represents should be the safety net and the last safety net. There are many other systemic and structural barriers that need to actually fall out before somebody gets into the homelessness system. So how do we push things upstream so people never even have to experience homelessness in the first place?
Right.
Yeah.
That is the Gordian knot, though. But some would suggest, though, that it's the mentally ill and the drug addicted need a lot more, not just a little bit more of interaction when it comes to trying to get them off the street.
It varies depending on the person, but absolutely, I think there's no question that people who are experiencing mental illness don't necessarily have what it takes all the time to navigate this very complex system on their own. Folks who don't have mental illness have challenges with it sometimes. So the role of outreach is to be that safety net for those folks and help them take all the steps that are needed to actually end their homelessness.
What about the service resistant? We hear I've heard from political figures at City Hall, they don't want to talk about it, but they're out there. The fact is that you can provide services, but if you bring them into a shelter where they can't drink, they can't do drugs, they don't have the liberty that they have on the street.
It's a varying experience for everybody, and in fact, sometimes going into a shelter can be a very triggering experience for people who have experienced trauma or who have a long history of substance abuse. So what we try to do is build a system that meets you where you are. Our outreach workers are trained in models like harm reduction and trauma-informed care. They carry around naloxone, which is intended to reduce the symptoms and the impact of overdoses. So how do we address and help those folks with those severe needs on the street where they are, instead of trying to force them to conform to a system that they're just not ready to?
They're salespeople.
Absolutely.
You're selling.
They're relationship builders. They build the trust and they build the rapport so folks feel like they have an advocate to get them into housing.
Right. There's an effort underway to overturn through the U.S. Supreme Court the decision out of the Ninth Circuit that says cities can't enforce the no camping laws. I assume that you side with the Ninth Circuit on that.
We believe that we need shelter for everybody, but it shouldn't be criminalized.
You have 60,000 people.
That's right.
And they would argue that you've already criminalized homelessness. The crime is taking place, and you have people in downtown and other areas. They say, listen, we see it happening right now, but we're not making any arrests because we don't want to touch the homeless.
There is nowhere for them to go. Our shelter system is occupied 95% capacity at any given time. So even the folks that say they want to go into shelter, we just don't have the resources to provide
It's
them.
a money issue.
It certainly is a resource and a money issue.
Final question. Dissuade us that this is the new normal. This isn't going away, ever.
Until we figure out how to address folks who are falling into homelessness for the first time and really stem that, and also build enough permanent housing to get folks into. I think LA County right now has 500,000 units short on affordable housing at a minimum. We're never going to see a difference. We need to build a system that addresses both ends and helps people and meets them where they are.
Heidi Marston is the Chief Program Officer for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck. Happy birthday to the City of Los Angeles when we return.